Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Fellowship in Essential Oils. Today we're looking at a really amazing oil. It's a pepper essential oil. But when you think of pepper essential oils, you're probably guessing, oh, we're going to talk about black pepper. We're talking about another one, although it's not related to black pepper at all, and that's pink pepper. And I'm joined by Elizabeth. How are you today, Liz?
I'm very well, thank you. And I'm really looking forward to this because I'm going to own up to not having done the work really before we got here. My bottle arrived at 20 past 9 last night, and I had started doing the research at 9. So I'm hoping you've got lots of things to teach me. I have lots of
Well,
thoughts.
it is a really interesting oil, but I'd love to know, since you've still got your first impressions from cracking open that bottle, what did you think?
I really like it. I really like it. And actually, what was interesting was I'd already sort of got ready for bed. And so I was like, well, I'll take this upstairs. And so my first impressions of it were shared with the dog. There's you sitting on the bed, and if you've ever like had a bottle of oil out with a dog who's used to essential oils, she sort of does her own exploration of it, and you could see her go, taste in the
Mm.
air. Oh, I like the smell of that, and I really like it. So my sister actually writes for a company that I also write for, and she often writes about perfumery, and so she'll put in pink peppercorn notes in perfumery, and she always describes them as fruity, spicy. So I kind of knew what I was expecting, but I don't get the fruity at all. I just get like, well, I was really smelling it. I was thinking, oh, I don't remember seeing 1/8 cineole on the GCMS, but it's kind of got that sort of pungent, clinical fragrance to it. But it's I don't think it's fruity. I feel it's kind of floral, a bit rosy kind of smelling. In a way, it reminds me of how Palmarosa shouldn't smell like flowers, and it does. This feels like that too. So I want you to tell me stuff about it.
Yeah, well, very much. I'm interested to hear what you think about the aroma and your description of it. I'd probably say if we were to kind of personify or genderize the two pepper oils, black pepper has got that kind of that more masculine, peppery aroma, and this is kind of like a lighter, more feminine type of aroma. Would you agree with that?
Mm, yes, yes. But what's funny actually, I always find it strange how my research kind of has like crossovers, and I've been doing quite a lot of thinking about fire with Francis Bartlett, and we were talking about how fire has obviously many forms and many structures. So to me, this feels like the smolder, if you like, whereas the black pepper feels like the ignition. It's not really the flame, but this feels like settled into myself, and I'm kind of leveling out. So
Mm.
so maybe feminine, but I still think it's kind of got a different dimension of like it's definitely got brightness to it, but it's leveled, balanced.
Yeah. Well, one of the prominent parts of the chemistry of pink pepper is limonene. So we think of limonene often coming from citrus oils. So it can be used in similar ways that we might use our citrus oils without having that photosensitivity. So it's going to be quite light and bright and uplifting for the emotion. So I do find it's a nice one to even, add a little bit of spice or a little bit of fun to your diffuser blends if that's what you want to do. But it still does have that kind of warming effect of the peppers. So it's a beautiful one, especially as we head towards Valentine's Day. It's a really, really nice one to put in massage blends or anything where you're trying to get more of that circulation flowing in that type of way. Especially if you want to blend it with something like a frankincense or a eucalyptus or a ravensara for the chest, we find that it can be a really great one in that regards as well. So I think it was kind of that uplifting and spicy and helping with movement. But one of the most common things that we really love for this one, and there's been a lot of more links more to the peppercorn than the essential oil, but for parts of the pink peppercorn to actually help to promote apoptosis of abnormal cells. And so there is some real, I'm not going to dive in and say totally convinced, but like preliminary studies on that possibly using pink pepper is great for overall cellular health in the body. Of course, limonene is going to help anyway with that, but especially, and where my number one use or recommended use for it is mixing with a bit of frankincense, and really good for breast health. And it kind of ties in quite nicely with breast cancer prevention and the pink ribbon and it being a pink oil. Each November we talk about it a little bit more because it's really great for that. So those are kind of the main physical reasons that we lean into it, that kind of getting everything flowing and getting rid of things that shouldn't be there, and helping to support natural, healthy cell function. What about yourself? In your hour of research, what did you find?
I found so much. So, first of all, I'll speak to your comments about the tumours and apoptosis, and remind people that is in a petri dish, not on people yet. And one of the reasons why that is important is quite often when it's put into sort of a human situation, blood bubbles up and spoils the adventure. But yeah, it is looking very promising, and also for leukemia cells as well. I found we tend to sort of divert away from that because I don't feel confident talking about cancer treatment with essential oils. But I also found that it's did you find out that it was an indigenous medicine of the Andes, and that the shamans of the area use it?
I was aware that it came from that area, so I would assume that, it's being bright pink berry, it would have been on their radar for sure for some use.
Well, actually, what they use mostly is the leaves rather than the berry. But as you quite rightly say, beautiful long leaves with this fantastic pink berry that stays most of the year. So it's a tremendously ornamental tree, which I understand is now in California and all sorts of places. But they use all parts of the tree. And the leaves in particular are interesting because they're quite often mixed with leaves of another tree to make a psychoactive blend, like a tripping blend. But and also the leaves are well researched for their abilities to help depression. But the constituent that they feel is responsible for it doesn't pass through to distillation. So A, it's not the same part of the plant, and B, it's wouldn't pass through to distillation anyway. But I do think that's a big part of the medicine. It feels very brightening and lifting and empowering to me. I feel like it's kind of got this surge of energy. They use this peppercorn as a drink, actually. So they put the berries into like a beer to let it ferment, and then they drink that, called chica, which made me laugh because that's what Deb calls me, chica. And so that's quite a strong booze of the area. And the berries are used for headaches and pain of all descriptions. So toothache, menstrual problems, aches and pains, where cold is involved. So then I'm like, okay, I've got my groove now. I know where we are with this medicine, because as soon as we get onto the energetics, I can feel it. So anything where cold seems to be indicated, and it's got very strong antispasmodic effects. So like cramping. So for example, if you have restless legs and as you say, circulation problems, if you have menstrual cramps, if you have head like feeling like it's been pushed in, and it does have this feeling of pushing energy outwards. And actually that's part of the reason why the tree itself has gone out of favor, because it is such an energetic tree that the roots push down and push up pavements, and then the berries drop and they seed and seed and seed and seed, and you'll literally have hundreds of seedlings round the bottom. So it has this real powerful energy of life running through it. And as I say, I think it's really fascinating that I've been thinking about fire, because I was really thinking about the Vestal Virgins of Rome and how their job was to take care of the fire, the sacred fire in the hearth in Rome. And what I found was absolutely fascinating is I mean, people are fascinated by the fact that they're virgins for 30 years. I don't find that very interesting at all. But the fact that they had to train for 10 years, then they held the energy and were the Vestal Virgins for 10 years, and then 10 years of passing that energy, that information on to the next generation, which seemed like a big thing to me. But then I discovered that they're recruited when they're six. So essentially, in that 10 years, they haven't got huge amounts of knowledge about fire to start with, have they? So actually, yeah. But this idea that they embody fire is fascinating to me. And so just thinking about that from a medicinal point of view of using a medicine to bring fire through in an emotional way, in a mental way, in a spiritual way. And as I said, I do think very much you can kind of categorize what kind of fire it brings. So if I don't know if anybody else has problems with cold hands or cold feet. I do. Um, and one of the things that is very difficult to me is if I've been outside and my hands do get cold, I go into the warm, normal warmth, don't put them onto anything and they burn. It's like the heat is just like goes into it really, really fast. It really hurts. And that's like a sort of a sideshow, a delight of having poor circulation. And I think this would be so good for that because you can kind of put it on a little bit earlier and let the circulation going so there's not that shock to the system when you go through. And so again, somebody who has high temperatures, when you're trying to bring somebody's high temperature down, the danger of that is that you bring it down too quickly. So again, even though you're giving them heat, this is a smouldering heat. So I think I would be inclined to use this in a situation where somebody was already having hot flushes and we wanted to kind of ease them, or if somebody had already got a really high temperature, giving them something like peppermint is really dangerous because you really shock the system to ease it down. That would be my experiment. And I can't speak to that in any way, shape, or form from anybody else's evidence, but that's what it feels like to me. It's like kind of easing the flame down.
Mm. I would really encourage anyone who hasn't worked with pink pepper before, if you make massage blends, if you do anything with massage, I think this would be a really nice addition to so many because of that kind of circulatory power that it has as well. I think also, I'd like to teach a little bit about aromatic dressing. So instead of using perfumes and colognes that have those artificial ingredients that upset our endocrine system, making your own, fragrances with your essential oils. I think pink pepper would be a really nice one to kind of bring an extra edge into that. But I want to run something by you. Obviously, we've got Valentine's Day coming up next week, so I'm doing a couple of online classes to do with aphrodisiac oils and different things like that. And talking about circulation, I've been looking a lot of, for men's sexual health as well, and oils for erectile dysfunction. And cypress and peppermint seem to be the common ones that a lot of people like. But do you think pink pepper could possibly be another one that could help with that as well?
Yeah. And I would put it with nutmeg. I think that those are strange choices for erectile dysfunction. I really like oils that move nitrous oxide through the body. So things like cinnamon,
Mm-hmm.
and what else? Sandalwood. And actually fragrantly they fit really well with pink pepper. Like it would be beautiful. So yeah, I do think so. Just like that kind of, well, yeah, slow burn. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, and also, again, I think I probably would be inclined to wonder about erectile dysfunction. Uh,
Mm.
no, premature ejaculation is what I was going to say. The slow burn. Yeah.
Yeah, got you. I guess the advantage of this one is it's got that kind of cinnamon bark especially is another great one, especially for getting that circulation going. But that's hot and it's fast. But we're kind of feeling with this one that this is a bit more of a it gets the things flowing, but not at a speedy rate, like peppermint or cinnamon bark, that you're definitely going to notice something happening quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think from an emotional point of view, it's very reassuring, isn't it? And I feel like there is that sort of element of somebody who maybe has gone through a situation where, well, A, maybe they've had sexual trauma, sexual abuse, or B, they have had a long time of non-success in the bedroom, and that's nerve-wracking to them, and they don't want like somebody turning up in stockings and suspenders and the whole deal. That's intimidating, you know. So there's, but also it kind of feels like there's an element of those who have feelings about guilt for with sex, or they've had emotional issues or religious doctrines that say, oh, you shouldn't be, the Madonna the whore issue, that kind of, again, it's too difficult for some people to really move into that. I am an outright, like, I embody my sexuality. Not everybody can do it. Very few people can do it. And so that's intimidating. I think it's very intimidating for a lot of people in Valentine's Day, where we're told, oh, you've got to be that person. I think this is very good for being like, well, it doesn't matter if you're not that person, but give you a bit of spice,
Yeah, yeah. No, I can definitely see that as well. And where I really love pink pepper, it's probably one of the main ways I use it on that energetic level, is not so much kind of in that sexual realm, but more in that romantic realm. I find it's really good for what I call tongue biters. Now, that's not someone who's a bad kisser and accidentally bites someone's tongue. It's for those people in relationships who tend to bite their tongue or not say anything to keep the peace. And they go, oh, no, 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 I won't bring it up because I don't want to cause friction in my especially my romantic relationship. But what happens, as we know, if we don't express it, we repress it, and that stores and sits as an energy within us. And just like we're talking about cancer before, growing and growing, it starts to actually cause, I guess, an energetic cancer within you. So those of you that are watching or listening to this and kind of know that you're a tongue biter, you go, each time we decide not to express ourselves, and I'm a guilty person in this as well, what happens is we don't, to try and keep peace in the relationship, but at the same time, we build a little bit of resentment and feel misunderstood. So as time goes on, it actually can tear the relationship apart anyway. So I find pink pepper is a really great one. If you think about what we've been talking about with that circulation and that slow flow, for helping us to express things in a loving but communicative way. You see, some of us grew up in either families where there was lots of arguing between parents or other family members, and we're like, I definitely don't want to be like that. So I'm not going to yell and scream or argue with my partner. And others like myself, I never, ever, ever saw my parents have a disagreement. So for on both those sides of the spectrum, we haven't seen a healthy form of conflict. And in a relationship, obviously conflict is inevitable, but arguments are optional. And I think if you struggle with that polarity, then pink pepper is going to be a really nice one to work with, to put on the heart chakra, even move it up to the throat chakra, to let you know that you can disagree with your partner, you can have those communications, but you can still do it in a loving way that actually doesn't tear the relationship further apart, but actually can bring you closer together in understanding.
Making me want to cry. I'm married to a tongue biter who gave himself mouth cancer by the sound of things. I absolutely agree with that. And what's interesting is that kind of does wander across into how black pepper is. Black pepper is very much about always thinking about somebody else, and black pepper goes, no, what about you for a minute? Very similar kind of thing, just for a moment. Doesn't have to go up explosively, but let's just put some heat in this situation, and let's just kind of see if we can resolve the conflict. The same thing, black pepper does the same thing.
I fully agree. Black pepper, for me, a key word for black pepper is authenticity. I use black pepper a lot for helping people with habits, bad habits like smoking and other addictions like that, but also on a holistic level for getting people out of the bad habits that they've got into of being inauthentic or not being themselves. So the peppers, again, as I said, these two plants are their Latin names are totally different. They're a different species, but they still do kind of carry these similar energies of authentically expressing who we are. Black pepper a bit more from that core Pluto kind of platonic energy, or Plutonian energy, I should say. Pink pepper a bit more from that heart base, I find.
Yeah, I think definitely. In fact, funnily enough, I said I was like messing with it when I was in bed last night, and I woke up and I got this ache at my heart, and I was like, goodness me, it's really worked that energy system so hard being open in the bedroom. So yeah, I could feel it. But I also think sun. I think that and I read this on somebody's webpage, and oh, it was really bad because I've forgotten who it was, so I can't cite them. But I thought as soon as I smelt it, I thought, well, they're right with what they say. They'd said for people who can't assimilate sun medicine, and I was thinking, or that they're frightened of the sun for some reason, and I thought, why would you be frightened of the sun? But I guess if somebody's been had a lot of been burnt, or somebody's had skin cancer, or there are people, I guess, who are allergic to sunlight, aren't there? Which is a weird thing, but there are. So that sort of imagine being afraid of the sun. You know, you wouldn't be able to go outside, and how like stripped of niceness your life would be. You know, you wouldn't be able to go out in the garden or see the flowers or any of those things. But I think also being afraid of the sun is also being afraid of people who are aggressive, people who are loud, those people who can stand up on stages, those people that own sun energy, you know, that they kind of embody the lion. That is, again, it intimidates a lot of people. So I think that is another thing. I feel like I've said this, but I don't know whether it was on this podcast the other day or if it was somewhere else. But anyway, so apologies if I'm repeating myself. But I have a friend who is a teacher and has been working as like a teaching assistant, so at a lower level. And there's good reasons for not doing it, as much as somebody in a teacher's role in the UK just has so much work piled upon them for stupid like gradings from the government. I can understand her not doing it. But she also has kind of lost her feelings of being authoritative. And there was another lady who was coming in to work at the school who I also know. And she's quite she's a loud kind of go-getter kind of person. What she says is she makes me look like gentle, and that takes some doing. And my first friend is quite intimidated by it. She was like, well, I think she's just going to walk all over me. And I said, so all you need to say is, well, I'm doing it that way. And she said, well, I couldn't work if she says something, or if she's funny. And I said to her, well, you just need to say, well, I'm sorry, you need to raise your game. And she was like, I cannot say something like that. And I said, it's so easy. But this idea of like trying on a more authoritative or a bit of like a sparkier reply, I think this would be good. Just this kind of thing of like, let's just heat it up a notch rather than being, right, I'm the fire warrior, you know, that's Ginger. But but just like kind of raising the game to be a bit more like, no, I'm going to speak up for myself.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. And, on the concept that I work with of where the oil comes from on the plant is related to an energy, and you were relating it to the sun. Anything that comes from a fruit or a berry is a fire oil. And I think this would be a really great one for anyone who has any kind of fear of fire, whether that even be physical fire and anything that's happened in that regard, but also those that just fear the fire element, that real assertive fiery, like, and you gave a classic example of that. So it'd be really powerful in that way. I'd love to ask you, talking about this kind of, we've talked about kind of sexual confidence and, you talked about the Vestal virgins, and that would obviously, allude to Vesta or Hestia as well. But with this confidence that pink pepper brings, what kind of goddesses come to mind for you?
Okay, so I'm going to say not only goddesses. So I would also think from any like a Greek perspective, we're thinking about Prometheus gave the fire to the humans, so that's kind of easily like Here, have some fire. But also Hephaestus was the god of the forge and how he could forge in flames. But then we got Kali, who is like an Indian goddess. The Hindu goddess is Agni, who is both embodied as the metabolic fire. So when you're talking about Ayurveda, the fire of Enyi is like the fire that metabolizes our food, but also gives us that drive, that motivation, that I kind of think dopamine surge within the body. So Enyi. Um, I would say Egyptian Sekhmet, Tefnut, both of those are lions. We talked about how it's Leo and how they are. Was Sekhmet is also an asteroid, sorry, a meteorite, so fire in the sky. If I remember rightly, isn't there a goddess of the volcano in the Philippines? And she's the I can't remember her name. I'm going to say Humaya, but that's not right. You'll be able to tell if that's right. That's one of your goddesses. But there is a Polynesian goddess who is the fury of the volcano, which is interesting given the state of Santorini at the moment. They're all being evacuated because Santorini's island is just exploding. And so there's loads of fire energy going on around us at the moment, which is why I've become fascinated with it. And talk to me about the goddesses, and then I'll come back to some thoughts about that after.
Okay, sure. I think the one you may have been hinting towards was the Hawaiian goddess Pele.
Yes, Pele, correct.
There you go. Yes. So I agree with everything you were saying, and I can see there's a case for every goddess that you mentioned, and as well as Prometheus. But I do also like to include in the mix as well Psyche. Again, I find pink pepper to be quite a profound, loving essential oil. And, I always find it interesting these new oils that are kind of coming to the surface, many of them from Australia, a few from Japan, they're kind of popping up everywhere type of thing. We're going to dive into a few of these over the next few weeks as well, which is really exciting. But Psyche is, we always think of Venus to do with love. But Venus, when we look at astrologically and that kind of aspect, she's to do with all relationships. She's to do with beauty. She's kind of that, and that romantic love, kind of that Valentine's Day love, if we must, in that way. And I know that when we work with Aphrodite or Venus, and the better we get to know that goddess, she is more than that. But in a typical archetype, that's where she is. Whereas Psyche, it's really worth getting hold of, the myth of Psyche and having a really good read of it, and even then looking at your own interpretation, other people's interpretations as well. Psyche starts off as a young girl, ends up getting whisked off to a castle. She has a lover who comes to her every night, but she's not allowed to turn the lights on to know who it is. In the end, her sister's placed doubt in her and she lights the fire. It ends up being the god of love, Eros, who then, because she broke her oath, flies off, and then she has to go through these dreadful tasks that Aphrodite puts her through to prove that she loves Eros, and then eventually is turned into a goddess. What it symbolizes, and that was a very bad description of a very long and beautiful story, but it symbolizes the journey we all go through from this innocent person through to becoming fully realized. And that, as we all know, there are things that happen to us in a romantic relationship that we cannot experience with a family member or a friend or a child or something like that. That brings out the best and the worst and makes us face our biggest issues and can probably help us with personal development bigger than any other relationship can. And so I find this relationship with pink pepper bringing that blossoming, bringing that fire out of us, what Psyche represents. And Psyche is a really interesting asteroid to look at. And when she goes retrograde every year, that's when you really look at your romantic relationship and go, is this the one that I would risk my life for and would I die for it type of thing? And really helps you grow as a spiritual being through your romantic relationship. So I love it in that kind of goddess / astrology aspect.
I am going to be inundated by many, many WhatsApp messages from Laurie Glenn now, who did the vanilla video with me while you were away, because Eros and Psyche is her myth that she studies from every possible angle. And so I'll be fascinated, Laurie. I want to know what your thoughts about pink pepper are. So that's really interesting.
And forgive my bad description. It's a
Yes,
very long myth, and trying to sum it
yes,
up, Laurie. I
you
did
need
my
to
best.
apologise. She knows every pocket, every single word, every comma in that myth. I'm telling you, and she'll be very. Laurie, I know what's coming. You're going to start to talk to me about Psyche's challenges, the different challenges that Aphrodite set out. I can feel it. Bring it on. um, really, we've gone too far away from what I was going to say, but I'm going to say it anyway because I just think it's interesting. Going back to these Vestal Virgins, who I just are just occupying my thoughts, and we know this is a dangerous space for me since once I get fixated by a set of priestesses, we're gone. But I was really thinking what started it was seeing these fires in LA and how out of control those were. And I mean, lots of shamanic groups, seeing shamanistic people talking about what they were going to do in order to help. And I kind of got a bit carried away with it to begin with. I was like, yes, I feel like I'm going to talk to the water nymphs and see what can be done there. And then there was other people who were saying, right, I'm going to talk to the wind. Fantastic, great idea, because the wind was properly taught. But it struck me, nobody's talking to the fire. That's very strange to me. Nobody feels that they have the relationship to go with fire. And actually, Sandra Ingerman piped up, and a fantastic shamanism teacher, and she said the only people that could talk to fire are those who have a really good relationship with fire and have it almost as if it was a family member. And I was like, whoa, that's not me. That's not me. But that is Vestal Virgins. That really kind of got, I feel like I chipped into what they were doing, because it's always in the back of my mind. What took them 10 years to learn? What took them 10 years to learn? I was like, that is what took them 10 years to learn. And so what I'm fascinated to do now is to kind of look at fire from all different parts. And this year I shall be really working with fire energy to try to understand it, and to I've spent a long time working with air energy, with water energy, and I was like, that's so interesting. When you look at people who are working as priestesses, loads of water priestesses, no fire priestesses turned up. And I remembered back to something that I had been doing in my classical studies degree last year. We were studying the Domus Aurea, the Golden Palace of the Emperor Nero, which was a fantastic building. I mean, incredible building, even now, just in archaeology, that stood where the Colosseum now stands. And as I say, it was built by the Emperor Nero, and he was so he's just after Jesus has died, so Christianity is about, but we're not there in Rome yet. He is very much a Hellenistic Greek. He really loves everything about Greece, and he's stolen, by all accounts, many of the fantastic Grecian statues and put them in this golden palace of his. He's got this enormous a statue of himself 60 foot high, if we're to believe the texts, of him as the god Apollo. And he's got a nymphaeum in there, and he's got this park that he's made for everybody to walk in, and he is like the personification of the god Apollo in this beautiful tower. Well, the angle that I was studying for him from was how people really didn't like him. Those who had really held on to the military ideal of Rome were just like, excuse me, this is what he's like, this is Rome, a bit like Trump is America, this is Rome. And there's this enormous fire in Rome, and all of the documentaries about him say that he was playing playing his cithara. That's what he used to play, like a lyre thing. And they say Nero fiddled by while and watched Rome burn. And I was like, well, that's rude. It only like occurred to me last week. Where are the Vestal Virgins anywhere in that documentary? They are the people that are the fire is Rome. You know, they were not allowed to let it go out because if they did, Rome would die. That the goddess Hestia, the goddess Vesta, who was Hestia, the Vesta was Rome, and yet none of the documentaries speak of them. And I was like, this is so interesting that even when the priestesses were the personification of fire, they were the personification of fire, they don't turn up when Rome is burning. So even then, it seems like they weren't really taken that seriously as being priestesses of fire. And when I was watching the fires in LA, I was talking to Frances, and she lives in Catalonia, where they also have lots of forest fires. They do burn. And she was talking about how in folklore, it has a mind of its own. It leaps between mountains, and that you could kind of, I was like, oh, fire spirits, I'm really feeling this. And then when I turned on the news, somebody was saying, you just watched it. It just jumped from one mountain to another. And I was like, so there is this intelligence of fire that we are all missing in this world now, because we don't spend hours making a fire. I'm the world's worst. So just go, give me some beeswax, that'll catch fire, you know. And when I was looking at sort of shaman rituals around it, there was this lovely one on YouTube, and the elder had said, we've had, I'm paraphrasing, so I might got with this slightly wrong, but we've had fire for 80,000 years, but only known how to start it for 40,000 years. And so they've got this like reverence of don't let it go out. It's so hard to start it off again. And when I'm thinking about these people who have had this situation where they've had religious repression of their sexuality, they have had their confidence around sexuality gone, but also they feel like they're not allowed to speak out. That flame is almost gone out. And so this ability to be able to move energy and start the fire again, I can't think of another oil that does it in the same way. It either goes bang, volatile. There's nothing else that goes gently, let's kind of just get that going, you know. I think it's really fascinating.
Yeah, no, it is a fascinating oil. So that leads me to ask one of our traditional questions. Do you think this is an oil that everyone needs?
I can't answer that because I haven't actually seen it in action, but I think interesting one to explore, and it's cheap, you know, it's not expensive to buy. It's an interesting one to explore.
Yeah, I guess it's probably one to, there's a few oils that I know from our discussions and just from, trawling the internet and different things, different oils come up. I've bought them once, and some of them I've fallen in love with, and other ones I'm like, meh, once this one's gone, then I don't think I have a place for this in my collection anymore. But I think pink pepper is definitely worth gathering as well. One short story I do want to share as well is where I get my pink pepper from with doTERRA. They source it from two places. So naturally in Peru, but also in parts of Kenya. And there's a beautiful story you can find on YouTube about it. And the story actually follows two women whose both their husbands, who were the breadwinners for those families, were killed in road accidents. And so the women were then stuck with several children and no way of earning income. And so the story kind of follows this journey about how they started making ropes out of reeds or out of plant material, and they'd go to where, it's a rural town that they live in, they'd go to where the truckers come through and they'd try and sell these ropes. And occasionally, maybe one of the truckers would buy one more out of sympathy than necessity. But then the women started to realize through connecting with these truckers that they weren't after the ropes. There was something else these women could provide them. And so basically what they had to resort to simply to keep their kids fed and going to school and so on was prostitution. Now, pink pepper trees, funnily enough, they're not native to these parts, but they were growing there, and doTERRA saw this opportunity for, we could harvest and get pink pepper from here as well. And so many women that are in this kind of situation are actually now harvesting pink pepper, and that gives them that sustainable income so they can support their family rather than going and selling their bodies. So it really, even what we've talked about today, it kind of triggered my thought of this empowerment about reclaiming our sexuality and not necessarily just being more sexual, but even being choosy on how we are sexual as well. So it's such a beautiful, empowering essential oil from the source it comes from. But I think of many of the things we've talked about today really does, and I think it's definitely a woman's empowerment oil mainly. Can be for men as well, but it really has that women's empowerment to it. Even that, working with the breast, when we look at Louise L. Hay's education, the breast represents self-love and self-appreciation. So, massaging a bit of pink pepper and frankincense over the breast, helping with that breast health. In so many ways, it ties it up in a nice little pink bow, in my opinion.
I like it. What a lovely story. And it really does tie in, doesn't it, with that sort of sexual guilt, all of those things that I was saying. It's very strange how you see them playing out in different threads. But yeah, I think it's when you were talking about oils that sit on your shelf, I have many of those. I have fewer after had the big clear out last year, but there are still some. But I can't see this being one of them, even though I know black pepper inside out, and I really love black pepper. I feel immediately, because I love the feeling that it gives me and I love the fragrance of it, I think I shall be using this a lot.
Interesting. I love that. Yeah. And I was just thinking, one final comment as we kind of wrap this one up. I find, there's almost seems to be a pendulum swing a little bit at the moment in different parts of the world. Maybe, in the 1970s and that kind of hippie era, there was a lot more free love and that expression of sexuality. But I am finding there are pockets of the community, and even probably I may be wrong with this, and I'm happy for people to disagree with me, but I think for when my generation were growing up, even as teenagers, we were more sexually forward than kids are today in some ways. And there is, that religious swing back to being a bit more, I'm hesitant to use the words frigid or prudish, but I think pink pepper can help with that kind of maybe finding a happy medium and a healthy medium in there as well. So it definitely has a bit of sexual energy in there as well. Our usual questions of chakra, it's a heart chakra one, planetary. I'm sure you're going to say Venus. Would I be right in that? And a bit of sun?
I'm going to say sun, a bit of Venus.
Yeah.
Sun,
okay.
Sun first, and I'm also going to say not just heart chakra. So I'm going to say sacral chakra and solar plexus chakra.
Beautiful. Yep. And I would astrologically associate with asteroid number 16, Psyche as well, type of thing. Any final thoughts or anything that I think for an oil that you've only had for less than 24 hours, you held your own in sharing about it. Is there any other final thoughts you want to share before we wrap this up and let people go and find their pink pepper and play with it themselves?
Well, actually, so I'm going to put a plea out there, actually. So if people are interested by my thoughts about fire, I would love to know, because I'm thinking of constructing a program called Tending the Sacred Fire around that. And so if you're watching this and you think, actually, that sounds really interesting, please tell us. And just to shamelessly promote that, to watch my space this week, because my Blue Lotus work will finally come out, and to remind people that my first class for the Aromatic Mystery School happens this Saturday, if you can make it, with the lovely Egyptologist Noha Ali, and she's going to be talking about how the temples align with the planets and stars and how they were specifically designed to work on different energy centers in the body. And then to talk about her research from the Temple of Edfu that tells us which oils click with it with different energy centers. So if you want to do any of those things, just click on my Aromatic Mystery School on my link tree and then come and talk to me.
Yeah, exciting things ahead. We've got lots lined up for 2025. Some other unusual oils that we're going to dive into as well, but you'll have to wait until next week to find out what's next. Until then, thank you very much for spending the time with us, and we will talk to you very soon. Take care and blessed be.
Bye bye.